Good morning. Today, actually, we have to go back because I don't remember anything about this chapter. So let me just go to the big, like two episodes ago, in terms of YouTube episodes. So the financial risk that the Federal Reserve took in the lender of last resort programs were quite minimal. As I have described, the lending was mostly short-term. It was backed by collateral in most cases. In December 2010, we reported to Congress all the details involved in 21,000 loans that the Fed made during the crisis. So it was not 2010 when the lecture was happening. When was that? Of those 21,000 loans, zero defaulted. Every single one was paid back. So even though the objective of the program was stabilizing the system rather than profit making, the taxpayers did come out ahead on those loans. So that was lender of last resort activity. That was the fire hose to put out the fire of the financial crisis. But even though the crisis was contained, the impact on the US and global economies was severe, and new actions were needed to help the economy recover, remembering that the two basic tools of central banks are lender of last resort policy and monetary policy. We now turn to the second tool, monetary policy, which was the primary tool used to try to bring the economy back after the trauma of the financial crisis. Conventional monetary policy involves management of the overnight interest rate called the federal funds rate. By raising and lowering the short-term interest rate, the Fed can influence a broader range of interest rates that in turn affects consumer spending, purchases of homes, capital investment by firms, and the hike, and that provides demand for the output of the economy and can help stimulate a return to growth. Just a few words on the institutional aspects. Monetary policy is conducted by the Federal Open Market Committee, which meets in Washington 8 times a year. During the crisis, it sometimes also held the video conferences. When we have a meeting of the FOMC, there are 19 people sitting around the table. There are the 7 members of the Board of Governors who are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. And then there are the 12 presidents of the 12 Federal Reserve banks, each of whom is appointed by the board of directors of that regional Reserve Bank and then confirmed by the Board of Governors in Washington. So there are 19 people around the table. We are participating in the monetary policy discussion. When it comes time to vote, the system is a little bit more complicated. At any given meeting, only 12 people are able to vote. The 7 members of the Board of Governors have a permanent vote at every meeting. The president of the New York Fed also has a permanent vote, which goes back to the beginning of the system and the fact that New York remains the financial capital of the United States. For the other 4 votes, there is a rotation system. Each year, 4 of the 11 other Reserve Bank president votes, and then the next year, a different set of 4 vote. So again, there is a total 12 votes in any given meeting or on any given decision on monetary policy, but the entire group participates in the discussion. Figure 30 shows the federal funds rate, the short-term interest rate that is a normal tool the Fed uses for monetary policy. You can see that at the end of Chairman Greenspan's term and the beginning of my term in 2006, we were in the process of raising the federal funds rate in an attempt to normalize monetary policy after having easier policy earlier in the decades in order to help the economy recover from the 2001 recession. But in 2007, as problems began to appear in the subprime mortgage market, the Fed began to cut interest rates. You can see on the right side of the graph that interest rates were sharply reduced. And by December 2008, the federal funds rate was reduced to a range of between 0 and 25 basis points. A basis point is 100th of 1%, so 25 basis points means 1/4 of 1%. By December 2008, the federal funds rate was reduced basically to 0. It cannot be cut anymore, obviously. So as of December 2008, conventional monetary policy was exhausted. We could not cut the federal funds rate any further, and yet the economy clearly needed additional support. Into 2009, the economy was still contracting at a rapid rate. We needed something else to support recovery, and so we turned to less conventional monetary policy. The main tool we have used is what we in the Fed call the large-scale asset purchases, or LSAPs, known in the press and elsewhere as quantitative easing, or QE. These large-scale asset purchases were an alternative way of easing monetary policy to provide support to the economy. So how does this work? To influence long-term rates, the Fed began to undertake large-scale purchases of Treasury and government-sponsored enterprises, mortgage-related securities. So just to be clear here, the securities that the Fed has been purchasing are government-guaranteed securities, either Treasury securities, that is government debt of the United States, or Fannie and Freddie securities, which were guaranteed by the US government after Fannie and Freddie were taken into conservatorship. There have been two major rounds of large-scale asset purchases, one announced in March 2009, often known as QE1, and another announced in November 2010, known as QE2. There have been some additional variations since then, including a program to lengthen the maturity of our existing assets, but these were the two biggest programs in terms of their size and their impact on the Fed's balance sheet. Taken together, these actions increased the Fed's balance sheet by more than $2 trillion. $2 trillion versus $35 billion. Almost 800 times difference. The economy scale difference is just 2 times 6, 12 times difference, but the financial industry is different by 800, almost 800. Why is that? Yeah, it also shows that how manufacturing sector is important there, but without financing cannot go further. 800 times. Figure 31 shows the asset side of the Fed balance sheet. So to help us see the effect of the large-scale asset purchases, the bottom layer is the traditional security holdings. To be absolutely clear, even under normal circumstances, the Fed always owns a substantial amount of US Treasuries. We owned more than $800 billion worth of US Treasuries. They have a lot of debt. That's for sure. We owned more than $800 billion worth of US Treasuries before the crisis began. It is not as though we began buying them from scratch. We have always owned a significant amount of these securities. So the bottom layer shows the baseline from which we started. Asset. What else appeared on the Fed balance sheet on the asset side during this period? Blah, blah, blah. I'll stop here.